And here we are again. I think we're on what would be considered episode 4. Um, as always, it's like I look forward to these conversations now. I think that we've established some cadence as to when these are gonna come out, but I want to say around midweek. But I'm finding myself looking forward to it, just kind of sharing these conversations. Um, I want to explore some idea of vulnerability this time around, just to kind of see one, how comfortable we are with this idea of creativity, and then sharing our own individual stories. But like we always start off, I wanna kind of jump right into mindfulness. 10 seconds focusing on your breath, and yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. And we're here. And as always, I'm gonna follow that up by with a riddle, a puzzle, and the one I have for you today is it's a question. At the end of everything, what is always there? At the end of everything, what is always there? Um, Today, what I want to talk about is just the idea of creativity as therapy, and that's a mouthful because one, I think therapy happens post when we recognize that there's something happening there that's tied to maybe trauma or whatever it is. Um, we recognize that something is happening. It's usually stems from something psychological. I don't want to use the word. Let's talk mental health, right? So maybe a challenge with mental health, and then because of that, we recognize that and we see how it's impacting our lives, and then we seek therapy. But a lot of us don't necessarily recognize when we're experiencing these things enough to trigger us to want to go and go seek therapy. And I think for me, growing up where I grew up, mental health and mental disorders weren't necessarily things that we talked about. I don't know that we were conscious of that they were happening. How do we recognize it, and how do we know how to deal with it, or how do we cope? And I remember there's 2 times in my life where I almost felt like there was so much happening around me that I almost felt like um, for some reason I was gonna die soon, and I couldn't put a finger to it. But the only way I truly knew how to cope with it was I told myself, hey, I have to write down what I'm feeling right now, um, and make a snapshot of my life. So if in the case of my untimely death, which in my head I predicted, there's a timestamp of kind of where I was and all the things that I was experiencing. Um, and the best way for me to kind of battle through those ideas was to write. And the first time I could think about it, like I think back on it, I remember just writing all of these thoughts, what I was experiencing, why I was experiencing it. And then it happened again, maybe like 4 or 5 years later, and I did the same exact thing. I just started to write. I didn't know what I was writing, or I had no intentions beyond just this timestamp. I didn't know what outlet I would use to, if it would ever get out. But I wrote, and it started to kind of take the shape of melody and music. And that's what it ultimately became. I never saw myself as an artist, a musical artist, especially not from a vocal standpoint. But when you write and you write words, they come out when you speak them or sing them, or however you get them out. especially when you add instrumentals to it. They come out in the form of music. And in this body of work that I created, um, the first line that I wrote, in the first two bars, I started off by saying, "How did I get here to the point that I'm releasing my life's memoirs? I've always been guarded like secrets of the Knights Templar." But then I followed it up by saying, "Maybe it's meant to be. I won't destiny doubt, but I promise to always put the best of me out." And that is how I started this writing process, or this writing episode. Um, and it got me through those two particular times. Now, in that moment, I didn't see it as therapy. I didn't see it as me needing an outlet to cope. It was just almost natural, intrinsic for me to kind of go to this space. And as I grew older, and I started to understand my creative process and the creative process of a lot of people use their creativity and their art as a form of therapy, right? A coping mechanism, if you may. And because of that, there's all this conversation where is art and creativity directly tied to depression or mental illness? And I don't know that there's any definitive research out there, but there is in fact a correlation. I think in moments when we're experiencing these things, these mental health challenges, I think for a lot of us, we don't know how to share those things. We don't know how to speak to them. We don't know who to speak to. When it's okay to share. Is this space safe for me to share those thoughts? And for a lot of us, most of the spaces that we occupy don't necessarily facilitate that type of vulnerability. And we lean our creativity to kind of help give us the ability to, one, express ourselves, give us the confidence to share whatever it is we're going through, and then an outlet for it. And I think that's one of the benefits of creativity. This space of non-judgment. And we typically find these spaces, and fortunately and unfortunately in these spaces, because of our level of vulnerability, because of our freedom of expression, we create art. Our creativity allows us to create art. And a lot of that art resonates with people. And why is that? It's because I think life is about perspective. I've always been open to perspectives other than myself, other than my own. But what's interesting is, because if we're not experiencing mental health issues or any of these challenges, there's a perspective that we can't hear from or we can't speak to. But when we're experiencing those episodes, it gives us a perspective that a lot of us feel but don't know how to share. And I think the whatever comes from it, the art that comes from it, whether it's music or writing or dance or whatever it is, I think it is the language and the voice of a lot of unheard people. And that's why when you hear music from people or artists who are going through their own mental health issues, it resonates with you because they're able to say the things in a way that you've always wanted to say it, but was always unable to because you never got to a space where you felt comfortable enough or vulnerable enough to share that. And it's actually, in a way, disheartening only like for us as a society that has to be the case. But I cannot fault us for doing that and having to resort to that. I think we just live in a world where, unfortunately, that's just the case. But the challenge is, or I guess this, what's concerning is a lot of the artists that we love, the creatives that we love, unfortunately feel like these triggers, these traumas, these issues are the catalyst of their creativity, or the source of their creativity, when in reality, creativity can be generated from multiple different emotional experiences. Not only trauma, not only depression, not only mental health challenges, but because it puts us in a perspective that is common but not quote unquote accepted, and it allows us to see life through the lens of the unheard. The art and the creativity the creativity and the art that comes from that is beautiful, and it's vulnerable, and it's transparent, and it's authentic. And it almost puts us creatives and us in general into this concept or this idea known as a tortured artist, right? It's like we almost feel as if though our creativity is tied to our mental health, our depression, when in reality it's not. It only seems that way because it's only in those moments when you're having those episodes that you feel connected to yourself. In the same body of work that I kind of started off this conversation with, I had a line that says, or that said, a line I wrote, and in it I said, I heard that sharing makes for a lighter load, but I found nothing more therapeutic than spending a night alone. And I remember the mindset I was when I wrote that. And for me, what in those particular moments, in isolation, in solitude, I'm able to be free. I'm able to be myself. I'm able to allow myself to think these thoughts and experience them and live in them. And it's energetic to me. It energizes me. And I go through this sprint of not needing sleep, just being hyper aware. And then as much as I studied this just to fully understand it, it was almost synonymous with a manic depression episode. And a lot of times our creativity and how we find it can seem that much connected to a mental illness, when I don't know that connection is any realer than it being triggered by something else. I think it's unfortunate that that's been, I guess, the constant, and it's been validated in our own experiences. But I can almost guarantee you that that creativity that exists within you can be triggered. That creative process can be initiated without you having to experience these episodes of mental illness or mental health. I remember there's a basketball player that I'm a fan of. Um, his ability to play basketball, and it's not because like he's not the biggest, he's not the strongest, he's not the fastest, he doesn't jump the highest. But I'm talking about Kyrie Irving, and he's had his controversial moments in the media, but as I said earlier, I'm a fan of perspective, and one of the things that he said, which resonated with me, was this idea that he's an artist, and for him, basketball, the game of basketball, is his art. And I've always said that I'm an artist too, and I'm a creative, and my creativity takes shape in the form of technology. But before this, when I was a kid, basketball was my first love. And I used to always tell people when I'm on the basketball court, I felt free. I felt whatever was happening outside of those four lines didn't mean much at the time. And most athletes feel the same way, that when they step on the field or the court or the pitch, it's almost like everything else disappears. And in it, they can live in their art, they can live in their creativity. And it's in making these connections that I realize that creativity is the ultimate form of therapy. In those moments when you step on the field and on the court, you're allowed to be your creative self. And it actually helps you cope with everything else that's happening. And for us for the non-athletes out there, I think however your creativity takes shape, I want to say it's okay to lean on it, lean on your creativity during the times where you feel as if though you're not yourself, where you feel a little outcasted. You feel a disconnect with society or the people you're around, the spaces that you occupy. Lean on your creativity. I think you'd be amazed with the therapy that it provides, and it allows the rejuvenation, the reconnection, the sense of purpose. And I think it's important for us all to kind of experience that. There's this idea that therapy is a result of something bad happening, or trying to overcome some form of trauma. And I don't necessarily think that one has to happen for the other two. And I think it's okay to want to live in your truth, to live in these moments where you can showcase your own creativity. And if that brings about some sort of euphoric effect or comfort or reassurance that everything is okay, then I'm perfectly fine with that. And I don't think it has to be at least tied to or triggered by something traumatic. want to ask you this. When's the last time you didn't feel like yourself? And as you're thinking about that, I also want to ask you, what did you do to kind of get out of that rut or funk? We spent like the conversations before this trying to figure out, all right, how can we, what is our creative outlet? How can we connect to our creativity? What senses speak directly to our soul? Over the course of these last few conversations that we've had, are you noticing your creativity anymore? Are you recognizing it when it's there? And if you are, in these moments, in these episodes, or whatever you want to call them, do you find yourself leaning on your creativity? If you aren't, I'm here to tell you that you should. And to be quite honest, for those who've actually gone to a therapist or sought therapy, it's actually pretty expensive. And for a lot of us, we don't have the extra money to unfortunately or fortunately dedicate to this. As much as it is needed, therapy is needed. We just don't have the resources to accommodate what it costs to get the type of aid that we need. But creativity is free. And I think the benefits that come from tapping into your creativity goes beyond just the satisfaction of creating things. The therapeutic nature of it is life-changing. And the next time you're experiencing anything, I want you to lean in on your creativity. I want that to be the thing, intentionally be the thing that gets you out of it. I don't want to, as always, I think when we get to this point, I always say this. I said, I don't want to prolong this more than it should be. I think my daughters always tell me that, Dad, you don't always have to talk for that long. I get it. I get the point after you say it the first time, you don't have to keep saying it. So I won't keep repeating myself. But to go back to how we started this conversation, the question or the riddle was, at the end of everything, what is always there? At the end of everything, there's always the letter G. It's there. With that, thank you for the time. Thank you for the space. I look forward to these conversations, and I will continue to look forward to them. And I'm most excited about you leaning in on your creativity and that being a part of your support system. Go be great.